Those ones are the same thumbnail. Okay, awesome. So...
Hi, my name...
Shut up. We'll get to you in a minute. So I watched the prior, like, the whole setup to stop killing games, all that fun stuff. I've watched, like, the Asmongold reaction to it. I'm generally in favor of it. I think the guy running it is not a great speaker, which is totally fair. But overall, from what I could see, it seemed like a positive thing. Now, I'm very curious about this like to dislike ratio, because I have a feeling that dislike button might end up being a fairly large number, considering how many views are on this. Let me just give you a bit of general maths for you. Let me just show you a video of mine, which has a lot less views, but it gives you a good, like, ratio. So here is a video of mine. This was the Google Chrome video. So this had 35,000 views on it, which is a lot less, obviously. But this has 2,600 likes, okay? So it's usually... You can usually assume somewhere in the range of 8 to 10% people interacting with the like to dislike thing. So maybe it's not super disliked, but a video like this, I have a feeling may get a lot of negative attention. I've heard a lot of people talking about it, so I'm curious to see what he's gonna say here. So let's 21k likes, 8.9k. I have a feeling it's not like massively. This is not a Call of Duty trailer that people hate, but I do feel like this number's probably close to like 10, 15,000. Anyway, let's see what he has to say.
Hi, my name is Jason Thor Hall, also known as Pirate Software Online. I've been in the gaming industry for about 20 years. I used to work at Blizzard Entertainment, then Amazon Game Studios, and now I own my own studio, Pirate Software, by the same name, which is an indie studio, and I've been here for about 8 years now. I also run a massive
How's the audio level, by the way?
180,000 people in Discord, and most of what I do is try to teach other people how to make games, teach them that they can make games, show them the tools to do so, and try to do everything without any paywalls or bullshit in the way. It's incredibly important to me that we keep making games and that the next generation has the tools to do so that our medium doesn't die out. And it never will. And that's the whole...
I think everybody can agree with that. Sure.
Whole intention of all of this. So with that in mind, that community brought me this and tried to get me to sign it. And I don't want to. Number one, I can't because I don't live in Europe. But number two, I wouldn't sign it even if I could. And I'm going to kind of go through this and try to explain the reasoning as to why that would be the case. Without all of the internet hate machine that's grown up around it. So let's go into how this works.
Don't worry, because the internet hate machines come to your video. You're never going to avoid that.
And why this is an issue to me. First things first, what is an initiative? So an initiative is actually not law. It is something that you put together so you can put it up in front of representatives and they can start the conversation.
Sure, yeah.
The reason why I have a problem with Stop Killing Games is specifically it starts the wrong conversation. If we're trying to kill off the practice of developers putting together a live service game, pitching it as a single-player experience, and then taking away support in the future, this ain't it. And the reason why is specifically on this initiative, under its own description, it says, this initiative calls to require publishers that sell or license video games to consumers in the European Union or related features and assets sold for video games they operate to leave said video games in a functional, playable state. Specifically, the initiative seeks to prevent the remote disabling of video games by the publishers before providing reasonable means to continue functioning of said video games without the involvement from the side of the publisher. This isn't always possible in all video games, and it
maybe he's just taking it slow. Maybe he's just taking it slow. Maybe he's gonna say something that... Maybe he's gonna say something here that explains this position, because that seems like it's doing... The initiative's set up to do exactly what it's aiming out to do.
doesn't call out the specific practice that this is supposedly trying to defeat. It is incredibly vague and will damage all live service games. How would you keep League of Legends in a functional, playable state? You'd have to re-architect the entire game. The game is what is called client-server. So in client-server,
you would make the server software available. Maybe the server software can't be made available because of licenses, but I don't see that being a system where you couldn't make that available.
Models. There's a server and there's a client, and all of the math, all of the game, everything happens on the server. The client just displays it. And the reason we want to do it that way is so that you can't teleport around and do 1 billion damage. You don't trust the client. You trust the server. The client just displays what it's told, right? So if we wanted to re-architect this, we'd have to take all of that server logic, push it back out into the client, and somehow make that playable in a multi...
Why would you need to do that? No. If you wanted to make it playable offline, sure. But that's not what would be suggested for League of Legends. What would be suggested is the ability to host your own server that people can connect to. Now, that might require re-architecting. That is absolutely fair, right? You might... The game's built around having a... Not a single server, because they're different regional servers, but basically a single meta thing you connect to that deals with all the back-end server stuff behind it. That might need re-architecting, but you certainly wouldn't need to push stuff onto the client side. Absolutely not.
Player-only video game. That doesn't make sense to me. So this isn't going to work for all games. Why is it calling out all games? And it's really easy to say like, oh, you know, that'll get worked out down the line. But we're dealing with government here.
I think it's confusing need with nice to have. The argument is for running an unofficial server, not making the game offline. Yeah, absolutely. Like, it would be nice if, like, we were talking earlier about Near Reincarnation. Near Reincarnation, the servers have gone offline. You cannot play that game anymore. People, at a bare minimum, would like the ability to host a private server to be able to play the game. It would be nice if you could play the game in a fully offline mode, sure, but even just having access to the ability to host your own server, like, that would be nice. And obviously, again, it might be difficult to re-architect the server side so individuals can host their own private servers, but it's definitely not moving it to the client side. Absolutely not.
If we're going to be putting up these types of ideas, specifically in front of government, we need to be calling out the right issues.
Sure,
especially if you
fair.
don't have precedent set. Because now you're going to be setting precedent on something that doesn't make any sense, with people that may not understand the nuance of our industry.
I will give him that. The people who will be writing the law are stupid. That's why when the TikTok CEO... Remember the TikTok guy who was in front of Congress and they were asking him, does TikTok connect to the Wi-Fi? Like, that's the people who are writing the law. So, you need to make sure that those people know what you're trying to do. Otherwise, you're going to have some problems.
The name of saving games. I can't agree with that. So let's go into why this is happening, right? So why did this start in the first place? What is the specific cases they've called out that are agreed?
Fun fact, you can host a private server on your local machine. That's your offline play. Well, the fun thing about the server thing as well is they would have alternative servers. Like that, they're not testing server changes on I hope they're not testing server changes on production servers. So they already have, for the sake of development, the ability to either run the game offline or run the game on an alternative server. So in most cases, that architecture is already there. Now, if you're doing it on production, which you shouldn't be doing on production, I guess that's fair, and you can't do that. But in most other cases, you have some way to test things separate from the production server. The server software might also sometimes be made specific server configuration. That's also fair. This is what I was saying before about you might need to re-architect some of the server stuff, server-side stuff. It might be set up in a way where it expects there to be a giant cloud server across many different systems. But there usually is going to be some sort of smaller scale development version for the sake of testing. Even if it is still some like distributed cloud solution, there's always going to be some sort of development testing for any server reliant game, unless you're doing things in a really stupid way. Again, doing things on production.
Egregious, and they have one. It's The Crew. So, action on The Crew. The video game The Crew, published by Ubisoft, was recently destroyed for all players and had a player base of at least 12 million people. Due to the game's size and France's strong consumer protection laws, this represents one of the best opportunities to hold a publisher accountable for this action. If we're successful in charges being pressed against Ubisoft, this can have a ripple effect on the video games industry to prevent publishers from destroying more games. First off, I don't like the idea in this that it has a player base of 12 million people. That is not how long-running games work. There is a large number of people that buy the game, and that player base slowly dwindles off until nobody is playing it anymore.
That is fair. You can't use sale numbers. And I really doubt The Crew had 12 million active players.
If there's any costs associated with keeping the game online, which this was an online video game, then eventually it costs more to keep it online than it does to keep running it, right? So the cost outweighs.
The Crew had IP issues, pretty sure. A lot of games that like have actual cars in them, have actual guns in them, have actual music in them that is not made specifically for that title, eventually do have IP issues. A good example of this is if you go and play, I think GTA 5 is a good example, actually. If you go play patch 1 of GTA 5 and current patch, a lot of music has been removed from the radio because they've lost licenses to some of the music they're using. And I think some of the older GTA games also had the same issue, where if you go play the later patches, especially if they've done re-releases like with the fucking Broken trilogy, a lot of the songs are missing because they just didn't relicense them.
Is the amount of income for it. There are bad business practices that can occur in there. There are companies that will sell a online-only game as a single-player experience and kind of just put it into the TOS and hide it. But not all companies do that. When they do, we should be calling out that specific company, not all companies. So let's take a look at this and find out more about The Crew itself. If we pull up their Wikipedia, we can see that The Crew was actually created in 2014, which, much to the hatred of all of us oldies on the internet, was 10 years ago. Oh. So this was an online-only racing video game developed by Ubisoft Ivory Tower and Ubisoft Reflections and published by Ubisoft. So all Ubisoft, right? With that in mind, it said it was a scaled-down recreation of the contiguous United States and included both role-playing and large-scale multiplayer elements. So it had a massive multiplayer component to it. It is an online-only service-based game, and they shut it down 10 years later. On March 31st, 2024, Ubisoft shut down the game's servers, rendering the game unplayable, which is normal for live service games.
But you can play the game without interacting with people. Like, this would be... The similar example of this is, like, Path of Exile, where you don't ever have to interact with people. Actually, Monster Hunter. Monster Hunter is a fucking fantastic example of this. So... I absolutely adore the way Capcom handles Monster Hunter. So, let's use World, for example. When World came out, every couple of months they would run events. So it's like, here's the Christmas event, here's the event for this game, here's the event for that game. Now, a lot of the time, what a game will do is they'll run an event, and then the event's just gone, right? Capcom, they did something amazing. When they were done running events, done updating World, they just decided to add all of the events they had previously hosted just as quests in the game, and you can just do them whenever. That is awesome. Like, that's a game where they really cared about the fact that people are going to be playing that years after that they had planned to continue supporting it. But in the case of The Crew, I'm pretty sure you can do, like, there's a solo aspect to this game as well. I'm 99% sure.
The thing that I can see in here that could be a problem is if they posted as not an online-only experience. But everything that I found online shows that the game was always marketed as online-only. If you're going to be buying an online-only game, that means it can only run when it's online.
I don't think anyone's arguing the fact whether The Crew marketed itself as online or as offline. The issue is, it was online, you bought the game, now the servers are offline, you still own the game, but now there's no game. Like, yes, you agreed to the fact that this is what you were purchasing, but it doesn't change the fact that there is still no game. Like, I get what he's saying here, but it doesn't change the fact that people want to be able to play this game still.
And if the servers need to shut down in the future, far in the future, it makes sense to me for the access to that game to be cut if it's online only. If it's a single player experience that has online only functionality specifically just to shut down the game in the future, and the online only doesn't actually add any gameplay functionality, I'd agree with you. That's a shitty business practice, but that's really rare. And in the specific cases where it does happen, we
Diablo 3. just as an example of a company you worked at.
Should call out
one day
that,
Diablo 3 will
not
shut
just
down.
all games and not all live service games. Further, there's more context to this too. The Crew itself came out in 2014, but it actually had a sequel that came out in 2018, and then it had another sequel that came out in 2023.
Sure.
And if we go to the Crew's SteamDB, which again is not going to be all of the player base for this, it's only going to show the ones who were playing it through Steam. It was on multiple platforms. We look at the max here. It did start out with a sizable amount of community, and then it degraded, and it had a major drop off in 2018, which is the same year that it launched a sequel. This is normal. When a sequel comes out, a lot of the player base, if the sequel doesn't suck, will move over to it, and then the servers effectively die. You can't run a live service game on this few players. You can't.
No one's suggesting they continue running it, though. That's not what anyone's suggesting. It's okay if they want to stop running the servers. That's fine.
Especially not if there's anything else that goes into it. And
the issue is that other people can't run the servers.
if we go into that anything else, and we could see that there was license problems. So on December 14th, 2023, Ubisoft delisted the Crew and its expansions from digital platforms, suspended sales of microtransactions, and announced that the game's servers would shut down on March 31st. So they gave them 3 months. Usually I would say, hey, 6 months is probably a better deal, but if they're going to do 3 months, they're going to do 3 months. The only thing that I'd be interested outside of that is if there was a contractual obligation to do more than 3 months and they didn't follow it, if it was in the terms of service or not. Citing upcoming server infrastructure and licensing constraints. What were those licensing constraints? Well, it turns out that all of the cars in the game were licensed from the car companies. And a 10-year running game likely means that they had license to them for 10 years. And that means that it would likely reopen for negotiation. Now understand that's speculation.
Now here's an example of a game that is much older than this, but you can still play it. Need for Speed Most Wanted. Like, yes, I get that they don't want to keep running it, and yes, that might become a licensing problem for them. But there's all of these single-player racing games that are completely outside the license realm, that you can keep running because you either didn't need to keep running a server. Actually, a good example of this, a good example of an online-only game that people have like revived. What is it? Is it Need for Speed World? Yes, Need for Speed World. So this is a game that was completely dead. No one gave a shit about it for a long time. Then it died and people cared about it. So Need for Speed World is a Need for Speed MMO. It combined the maps of Carbon, Most Wanted, and I think like Underground 2 or something. And originally it had like a ton of microtransactions and people didn't like it. But on a private server, people have very much changed their mind about it. And apparently it's like a really good Need for Speed game, especially compared to the modern ones. Now that people have control over the way the internal funding is done, which is often just don't run it.
But I've seen this type of a deal many
by the way, have you tried Cold? Yeah, I'll try it on the weekend.
times in the industry while I've been working in it. So it's not unlikely. If you're going to have to renegotiate on a game that has so few players and is not turning a profit anymore, you're probably just going to forego the renegotiation. And if those servers are aging, you're not going to want to recreate that infrastructure. And there are some people that'll say, well, just make it all single player. Well, I've explained that doesn't make any sense in the first place. If you're making it all single player, you'd have to carve off all of that, and it's developer time and money. When you already have sequels out and the game has basically no players left anyway, it makes more sense to just...
I don't understand the just make... I get people saying just make a single player, you don't understand it, but I don't know why he's bringing up this up as an argument. Like, I just don't get that as, like, a main crux of his point here.
move on. I don't find that to be a problem from the developer perspective, and I understand that people find that to be a problem from the player perspective. These are two different ideologies, and that's okay to have two different ideologies. I just won't agree with it because I understand the burden that puts if we raise that problem in the way that we are right now. If you try to tell me that every studio needs to run their live service game indefinitely or not want to run one at all, then no one's going to run them, and we're going to miss...
No one's suggesting that. Stupid people are suggesting that. No one who's actually making an argument here is suggesting that.
...out on adventures like Final Fantasy XIV, and even though I don't play anymore, League of Legends.
Final Fantasy XIV 1.0 has private servers now. There is private servers being worked on for Final Fantasy XIV, and this is going to keep the game alive after they decide we just don't want to run the servers anymore. No one is suggesting they have to do it forever. What people are suggesting is games should be built from the ground up, like a game like Counter-Strike, like a game like, what's another good example? Most of the old Call of Duty games, where you can run, actually most old shooters in general, Quake, where you can run your own server and you can keep a community alive here.
Legends, or any other live service game, any of them. You're talking everything, like even...
Or Minecraft. Minecraft's another good example as well.
Phone games, as funny as that is. A lot of people don't realize that phone games require online-only activity. What about things like Pokemon Go? What about stuff like Monster Hunter Now? What about any of these? We'd never get any of them. And that's why I think this needs to not be vague. It needs to be specific about the business practice it's trying to defeat, which is specifically companies that are doing this under the guise of it being a single-player game, but adding online-only functionality that is not necessary and doesn't add any gameplay elements.
That's not what people are arguing. That's not the point. It's fine if a game has online-only capability. I would prefer that it didn't, but that's not what's being argued. What's being argued is if it does have that online requirement, provide a way for people to do that, or if not provide a way, don't stop them, right? Like, I understand a developer not wanting to go and release their server software, but if people are trying to do a custom private server and build it from scratch, they reverse engineer it after the game is dead, I think you shouldn't be stopping those people, right? And I think that's also part of what's going on here as well. If someone wants to go and make Project, what's the FF14 one? Project Sapphire, or they want to do any of these other, like, the Need for Speed World one, you shouldn't be stopping them.
So now we're going to go to Ross, otherwise known as Accursed Farms, the creator of this initiative, and one of the ones that's pushing it the most online. I'm going to let him say exactly why he thinks that this will go through very easily and why it is important, and then I'm going to tell you why I don't agree with it.
Comes law in the EU? Yeah, it might be. Now, it's not a guarantee, but I think if we get the signatures, this passes. Why do I say that? Well, it's a few factors. Politicians like easy wins. And this doesn't require them to do much at all.
Ross is not a great speaker. I think the thing that really hurts the entire movement is, like, he's got a good argument made here, but a lot of people see the way he speaks and the way he looks and are gonna look a second way about it, or not look at it a second time. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
Unless it involves gambling or protecting children, politicians generally don't care about video games.
True.
So this isn't of big consequence to them or most of their constituencies.
I'm going to stop it there for a moment. The assertion that politicians just like easy wins, so this legislation will go through, but the politicians don't care about a multi-billion-dollar global industry and that it doesn't matter to their constituencies is incredibly absurd to me. I don't think this is the right direction at all for a movement like this. I think it's incredibly damaging and it makes our entire industry look bad, both on the player side and the developer side. If we're going to be putting forward anything that may eventually turn into legislation, it should be passing because it's the right thing to do for consumers and developers, and that there's some kind of a middle ground, not just because it's an easy win and politicians don't care. This sets us off on a completely wrong foot.
EU law is already unclear on a lot of this practice anyway.
And that's dangerous. If we're going to be setting precedent, which could change the way that law works all the way down the road.
What would make devs not want to release server software for games where they have nothing to hide because they don't use any? Usually they have licensing deals. They might have certain software components where they can't release it. It might be tied to the architecture of currently running games. So, like, if you're a company that makes multiplayer games, you don't just throw away your entire multiplayer architecture when you go from game 1 to game 2. So by releasing the server software, it might make it easier for people to, cheat on a currently active game. And then there's licensing issues where they don't actually make the server software themselves, but they're actually using someone else's server software. There are certainly issues in this regard.
We need to be sending the right message, which this is sending a vague message that doesn't cover the actual problem. So this is not a win to me. This is a huge risk.
Some games just lost the code of servers. That's also true.
We would be making it easy for them to settle it. It falls in line with other consumer practices. You know how when you buy something, you're generally allowed to keep it?
In the case of live service games, in the terms of service for those, you are not buying the game. You're buying a license to the game. And that
TOS is a really interesting issue. There's been a lot of issues with actually enforcing terms of services because it's hard to prove that someone has actually read the terms of service. And if someone has not read a contract, there are issues with actually enforcing that contract. This is why a lot of the time you have terms of services that have now been greatly simplified over what they used to be. Because there are a lot of jurisdictions where, because they were so complex in the past and you legitimately needed to be a lawyer to read them, they could not be enforced. Now, this is not like a thing in every single region, but bringing up the TOS is not like a guaranteed win like he's bringing it up as.
That's the part that's really different here. If we don't like the idea of live service games as a whole, I get it. Don't play live service games then. Don't agree to those terms. But if we're under this weird idea that we need to get rid of all live service games or damage that practice in any way to keep
no one's saying that.
In line with consumer policies, it is in line with consumer policies. If it wasn't, it wouldn't be there in the first place. So this doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Wait, sorry, what was
It
that?
is in line with or damage that practice in any way to keep in line with consumer policies. It is in line with consumer policies. If it wasn't, it wouldn't be there in the first place. So this doesn't...
If it wasn't in line with consumer policies, it wouldn't be there in the first place. Well, no, because there are companies that do break the law. Like, that's... I think I know what he's trying to say here, where if what they were doing was wrong, they would have already been, like, fined over it. But sometimes things don't get dealt with until way later down the line, so it's not exactly a great win there either, I would say.
Really make a lot of sense to me. You're not buying the game, you're buying a license to the game. In the niche cases where a studio is trying to sell a game as if you...
And this is something people really want to see go away. Yes, that is what is happening right now, but people want that to change. People don't like buying licenses to games. They like buying a game. They like having a thing and then being able to do anything with it anytime down the line.
You are buying it or purchasing it or using that language specifically and they give you a live service game instead, I agree that should change. That language should change. You are not purchasing the game. You are not buying the game. You are paying to have a license to a live service experience. I get that. Is that what this is doing, though? The initiative is not trying to call that out specifically. It's trying to say that all games need to stay in a functional, playable state, which is not calling out the language that is being used to manipulate the player. Call that out specifically.
No, that's asking for games to be able to be in a playable state, not they have to be in a playable state. If the server software is out there and then no one wants to run a server, that's fine. That's totally okay. Because you can choose to go out of your way and run that server and get the game running. But as it stands right now, no one is putting in the effort to make sure the game is playable. Not the developer, not the community around it. Because the community is just not able to do so.
Not this vague bullshit.
And finally, this is a diversion from really serious topics that politicians would prefer not to deal with.
Yeah, this is the way he's framing these points here. I will agree that the way Ross has framed these is really stupid.
That's really gross to me as well. The idea that this is just a diversion from serious topics and they can get an easy win in and we can just push it through and there won't be a lot of pushback on it and they're not going to have to think about it too hard. That's crazy dangerous, dude. If you're going to be setting precedent, if you're going to be putting forward something that you want to start a conversation to eventually become legislation.
Counter-argument, reverse engineering? Well, yeah, I'm fine with that. The problem is when companies try to stop it.
And these are the reasons for it. Not only can I not agree with the initiative, but I can't agree with you. And I think that the tactics that you're using here are really disgusting. So yes, I won't agree with that. And I won't agree with Ross. There's no way around that. I think this is gross. To sum it all up, no, I will not be supporting the initiative Stop Killing Games. You're not going to change my mind on it because I find this language to be incredibly vague and damaging to the rest of our industry.
Yeah, the reasons are kind of
stupid.
stupid. Like, I
I
don't know why you put them
developers
there.
and players down the line in the way that it is currently written. And I think that starting a conversation that doesn't get to the core of the issue is both wasted time and leads to potentially bad outcomes. So if we want to talk about this, let's talk about the actual bad business practices. In the case that a studio is making a live service game and they sell it to you as a product, they say that you are purchasing the game or you are buying the game, when in reality you're actually purchasing or buying a license to that game. I think that we should be fighting about that. That needs to go away. A player should be...
I think the idea of you buying a license to a game should go away full stop. Let alone whether companies say it or not. The idea that you only buy a license to a game, and this applies to like buying a license to a game on Steam as well, with it's not a live service game. Because if you get banned on Steam, you lose your game library. You don't own any of those games. Your game library is tied to your Steam account. I think the entire idea of just owning a license to a game needs to go in the fucking bin. It is awful to the consumer. And the fact that this has been able to happen for so long, like, I really want something to change.
Be well informed at the point of purchase that they are purchasing a license, not buying a game. And the reason that we have those licenses in the case of client-server interactions, like we had before, we're talking about client-server games, is so that they can ban you when you cheat at them. They revoke your license. That's why they revoke your license, to protect the gameplay of every other player that you're impacting.
Say that again?
Before, we're talking about client-server games, is so that they can ban you when you cheat at them. They revoke your license. That's why they revoke your license, to protect the gameplay.
Well, you're not necessarily getting your license revoked in most cases. You may have an account banned, but the license is separate to that because you've bought it through a client like Steam, and it depends on how they actually handle bans. Not every game is doing a license key ban. Sometimes you can roll a new account and still have that, or it's like a sub account of an account. Like, different games ban in different ways. I do think this goes back to what I was saying, right? And I think the reason he brings this up is because he's missing like the main point. No one is saying that you shouldn't be able to ban people from the main server hosted by the developers, but you should be able to run a server separate from the developer's server. I think the fact that he missed that point entirely, like that is one of like the main points of the video, and he completely misunderstood that. Like no one involved is asked. I've said this like 5 times already because it keeps bothering me. No one involved wants the company to run the servers forever and for you to be able to play on those servers forever. If they want to shut them down, that's fine. But there should be a backup there so the game that you bought doesn't just become completely wasted data.
Of every other player that you're impacting when you cheat at these games. That needs to exist, but it needs to be better informed to the player at time of purchase. So I agree on that. This doesn't bring that up, though. It just attacks all video games that have online-only components and says that they need to keep being able to be played indefinitely. That doesn't make any sense.
Incorrect.
Aside from that, a lot of people really like live service games as they exist now. So trying to kill off all live service games, as some people have said online, doesn't make any sense either. Live service games are a great way to get away from the real world. They are about social interaction between players. Some people get married in them. Some people met their spouse in them and then got married in them. It's a really cool thing for a point in time in which you're having that social experience.
I'm disappointed because I expect Pirate Software to understand and be balanced. Instead, this feels like whataboutism/strawman. Yeah, like, I think he's coming at this from the perspective of being a game developer and not Also, just misunderstanding the main point of what's being said.
Experience. And to destroy that just because you don't like them is very weird. I don't think that makes a lot of sense to me. I also don't think it makes sense the way that Ross is posing this is why it's going to pass. I think that's incredibly inflammatory and could lead to a lot of damage to both what he's trying to stop and to games as a whole. To say that the government just doesn't care and this is an easy win and we're going to get it through is disingenuous. You're talking about a multi-billion-dollar global industry. To think that the government isn't going to be
Rossman reacted to his first video. Oh my god.
Meticulously looking through this and looking for flaws and holes is absurd. So I don't think that's honest at all, and I find it disgusting. So for everyone who's mad about that, fine. Be angry about it.
No, I know who you're talking about. I'm not going to change
my stance on that Rossman, because I can't agree with this, both as a dev and a player. I see the danger involved, I see the vagueness in the language, and it doesn't make sense to me. If we want to fight for better conditions for players, then fight the actual problem. Don't make new ones.
So I'm pretty sure there's a... Wasn't there a reply under here? Okay, let's do a little roundup and everyone's saying the same stuff. Why shouldn't we have the right to serve binaries so we can keep playing these games? Are you going to allow monetization? Okay, here's the really stupid comments. Are you going to allow monetization of these servers or not? If we don't allow monetization, who would be the party that enforces non-monetization of that? Who would be the party that enforces non-monetization of that server? That would be the government, yeah. I feel like we make... Well, no, that's red tape that already exists. If it's the company, then this doesn't work if they shut down... Well, yeah, if the company shuts down... If it's an abandoned IP and the company is shut down, yeah, no one's going to stop it because no one's losing out on monetization. If you're monetizing a... Like, let's say, for example, Square Enix shuts down and you host a FF11 private server because those already exist. If Square Enix shuts down and no one owns the IP, it doesn't matter if someone's making money off of it. It's an abandoned IP at that point. If we don't let monetization, who's going to pay for the hosting service can't be monetized? The fans who want to host the server that already do that. That if they want to host a game. If they can't be monetized, then the servers will... Yeah, and then someone else... If someone else wants to host the server, then they host the server. We don't end up preserving games like this. We just shift death... No, because the server software is out there. Does Pirate Software have any background in open source? Because I feel like if he had any background in open source, he would realize like why saying this is really stupid. I know he worked at Blizzard. Has he like contributed to any open source projects? At least any that you're aware of? Unsure. I have a feeling the answer would be no. What if you make your own video on this topic? There's a chance to ride a wave and get into mainstream. That wouldn't happen because my main channel, like the way the videos work on YouTube is it has to be popular in your core audience and then it will branch out from there. So if no one in the core audience watches it, then it doesn't branch out from there. If we do allow monetization, this leads to a really weird attack potential if people can monetize the servers. You make an awesome game as a small community. I want to monetize that game and run my own servers. I create a shitload of bots and constant exploits to erode the game and your business. Your business closes. Now you have to give out server binaries in a play. Moderate... What? Moderate your own servers? If someone decides to flood your game with bots... Doesn't just shut your company... People could run bots on your servers even without that. What? Core audience is us, mostly. This isn't unlikely, as we've seen mass attacks such as with TF2. Yeah, TF2 isn't a small community, though. TF2 is a giant game. Also, they just moderate the bots. Valve didn't shut the game... Valve didn't shut down or shut the game down. We actually see this... echoes of this in the mobile market as well. The only offense right now is DMCA or other tech... No, just moderate your game. Ban the bots. Devs legitimately have very little protection as is, and will erode that further. This creates an incentive for abuse where the abuser is protected as they are within their legal right to operate said abandoned game servers. Yeah, if the games are... What? I'm confused what he's saying there. Okay, Jesus Christ, a lot here. He's just a rich ego now. I've been indie game dev for 8 years, and most of the time... Yeah, this is a stupid comment. I've made less than federal minimum wage. I've just gained financial success in the last year due to the community supporting me in what I do. Now that I have more... I've poured all back into community, charity, animal rescue. I've become a millionaire, then I've failed. Yeah, this is a stupid argument. Like... He's not offering a solution, he's just yapping. Except I have offered a solution. Inform the customer at point of purchase they'll be getting a license for the game. That's already done. It's in the terms of service, as was pointed out in the video. It should never be posed as a purchase or buying the game at all, because you aren't. I think that's fair. Steam should point it out from the start that you're buying a license. That's valid. You're buying a game, and a big part of the problem is that players don't know what this means. Licenses like this allow developers to ban bad actors from the service and are insanely important. That's fine. You should be able to do that, but you should be able to run your own service. He banned Ross and hates players. No, I did not. Ross is not banned from this channel. Yeah, people are stupid. As soon as they see a comment disappear, they're stupid. And they're like, ooh, you banned from the channel. I think that his point in this segment is bad actors can put a game into a situation that forces a shutdown. Well, they can already do that. Like, it's such a 4D chess situation. You force a game to shut down so you can run server binaries for that game. Like, here's the thing though, if a game is so bot infested that people quit the game and they decide to shut the game down, why would the game that's now so unpopular because it's full of bots suddenly have a community after the game died? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me as a situation. As of now, the list is over 1,000 people. Yeah, people like YouTube likes to shadow ban people. It's a great website. It's easy to do because the FAQ said so. That I have a feeling this is obviously stripped down to make it sound stupider than it is. It's very clear that nobody involved in writing that FAQ actually makes games. I've had a 20-year career in the industry making spending from QA, engineering, IT, and red team. These demands are not simple problems to solve and cannot be easily done even for new games. It's not feasible to produce requested content in the initiative. I'll have a look at the FAQ in just a moment. Demanding this and stating that all developers are wrong and greedy is actually absurd. This won't even affect live service games. Read the FAQ. I did, and the FAQ does not change the potential damage done to live service games. Under the current initiative, all games would need to be made into a playable state at the end of... The way I understand it is it's about making the server available, not they have to run servers forever. This puts a massive financial... Okay, this is just misunderstanding the point. Why would I spend extra money building a live service, a distributable server for end of life? I wouldn't. Well, that's the point. You would build the game from the ground up. And if you can't build the game from the ground up like that, then you shouldn't make your game. This is something that Asmund says quite often. If you can't make your business operate in a ethical way, your business shouldn't exist. And I completely agree with that. I'll just make single player or local play games as they cost less to produce under this scenario. That's fine. If you can't operate in this space in a way that is good for the consumer, you shouldn't operate in this space. For those that say good and dislike live service games, it's not a matter of good and dislike live service games. It's a good you shouldn't be unethical. Your personal dislike of live service games should not control developers on what they could or should make, nor should it limit players in their options or what kind of games they have access to. If they cannot be made in a way that is sensible, yes, it should. He won't even talk to Ross. Correct. I think his position is this is stupid. This is stupid. Why would you even include this? I think his position is disingenuous due to his comments about how this could be pushed through government. It's a bad direction, removes validity for what the initiative is trying to do, portrays the process in an incorrect manner, and just builds sensationalism. Thinking that that kind of language is okay puts him squarely on my not worth talk to list, as there are others that could have a more productive conversation. Lewis Rossman, Asmund Gold have much better takes, and this naturally try to engage the issue in a measured way. I think this is a really stupid take because it's clear that he's misunderstood a lot of what Ross was trying to put forth. And yes, that one part of the video makes Ross sound like a fucking psychopath. Sure, absolutely. But to say you won't talk to someone over that thing, like, that's really dumb. Talk to him, understand his position, learn why he's saying that, and then if you still disagree with him, that's okay. But at least talk to him and understand why. At the end of the day, I am now and always have been a game developer. The majority of my platform has and will continue to be advocating for teaching how this industry actually works. This Flashpoint moment is the greatest example why players need to actually know how games are made. Why do you think I run game jams or Discord to help you make games? It's so you can see that requests like this don't make sense and gain perspective on the industry. It stops the internet hate machine from bandwagoning against developers, which always happens due to lack of perspective. Stay frosty. Okay, greedy game dev. Oh, God. Yeah, this has thrown, like, a giant wrench into this situation. Like, this was going, like, really productively. And, now, you know... we'll see what happens with this going forward. So let's watch part 2.
Hi, my name is Jason Thorhall, also known as Pirate Suffer, and the other day I put out a video called Stop Killing Games, saying why I would not support the initiative. Overall, it was actually quite positive. The analytics on it show that people really think it's a good idea. There's a huge amount of like ratio, and I received hundreds of comments from developers thanking me for putting it out because they can't speak publicly while they're at a business or a job elsewhere. A lot of the times, major companies will fire you if you are speaking out of turn and cause a PR disaster for those companies. And since this is such a popular thing among players, most devs aren't going to say anything to you. So I am. So let's discuss the most common requirement.
I think the idea is to push companies to be where, if they want to make a live service game, it needs to be planned for shutdowns in mind, not to retroactively... Yeah, that is true. Yeah. Not to retroactively make this happen to all existing games. Yeah.
Which is, games have to be left in a functional, playable state. Now,
oh my God, he's still saying this. Holy shit. Okay, let me just read the FAQ. Is that what the FAQ actually said? Okay. So how are publishers destroying video games? An increasing number of video games are designed to rely on a server the publisher controls in order for the game to function. This acts as a lifeline to the game. Where the publisher decides to turn this off, it is essentially cutting off life support to the game, making it completely inoperable to all customers. Companies that do this often tend to prevent people from repairing the game by withholding vital components, so reverse engineering the server. When this happens, the game is destroyed, as no one can ever operate it again. Okay, let me just scroll. I don't want to read all of it. Let me just quickly read through this. So why do people care about publishers destroying video games? Okay, if companies face penalties for destroying copies of games they've sold, this is very likely to start curbing this behavior. If a company is forced to allow customers to retain the games in even one country, implementing those fixes worldwide becomes a trivial issue for them. Or you can go the Apple approach, where you decide that you're only going to do it in that single country, and then stop people everywhere else. Like, with the sideloading on iPhones, it's only in the EU. You can't do it anywhere else. So if destroying a game you paid for became illegal in France, companies that patched the game would likely apply the same patch to the games worldwide. An analogy to this process is how the ACCC in Australia forced Valve to offer refunds on Steam, so Valve ended up offering them to people worldwide. That is because Valve isn't a completely terrible company. They're not a perfect company. They definitely have problems. But they're certainly better than Apple in that regard. Aren't you asking... Okay, here we go. Aren't you asking companies to support games forever? Isn't that unrealistic? No, we're not asking that at all. We are in favor of publishers ending support for a game where they choose. What we're asking for is they implement an end-of-life plan to modify or patch the game so that it can run on customer systems with no further support from the company being necessary. We agree it is unrealistic to expect companies to support games indefinitely and do not advocate for that in any way. Additionally, there are already some real examples of publishers ending support for online games in a responsible way. I don't know about any of these games. So, okay. So he's not actually read the FAQ. Isn't it impractical, if not impossible, to make online-only multiplayer games work without company servers? Not at all. The majority of online multiplayer games in the past functioned without any company servers and were conducted by the customers privately hosting servers themselves, connecting to each other. Games that were designed this way are all still playable today. As to the practicality, this can vary significantly. If a company has designed a game with no thought given towards possibly letting players run the game without their support, then yes, this can be a challenging goal to transition to. If a game has been designed with that as an eventual requirement, this process can be trivial and relatively simple to implement. Another way to look at this is it would be problematic for some games of today, but there is no reason it needs to be for games of the future. Okay, sure. What about large-scale MMOs? Isn't it impossible for customers to run those when servers shut down? Not at all. However, limitations can apply. Several MMORPGs have been shut down, have seen server emulators emerge. RuneScape, when OSRS wasn't a thing, when they migrated over to RuneScape 3, there were a lot of private servers. I know FF11 has them. EverQuest has them. A lot of WoW had them before Classic came out. Not all of this will be scalable, however. For extra modding video games that require powerful servers the average user won't have access to, the game will not be playable on the same scale as when the developer or publisher was hosting it. That said, that is no excuse for players not to be able to continue playing the game in some form once support ends. So if a server could originally support 5,000 people, but the end-user version can only support 500, that's still a massive improvement from no one being able to play the game ever again. Fantasy Star Online has them? Yeah. Okay, so Thor hasn't actually read the FAQ. Cool. Good to know. Let me go back a little bit.
And since this is such a popular thing among players, most devs aren't going to say anything to you. So I am. So let's discuss the most common
He's either not read the FAQ or intentionally misunderstanding it.
Requirement of the initiative, which is games have to be left in a functional, playable state. Now, what happens if that game is a online-only live service game? Well, if you want that to stay in a functional, playable state, that means the devs have to release either server binaries or somehow carve off the game to be a single-player experience now. Some way to keep it functional and playable, right? Now, many of you are requesting, yes, I should get the server binaries so that I can go and make private servers for this. But that doesn't make a lot of sense in the real world. And the reason why is because it leaves developers open to abuse. So let's explore that a little bit. Let's say that you made your own video game, and you made a live service game. Maybe it's an MMO, maybe it's something else, right? And let's say that I want to monetize that game, but you don't allow monetization of the game by any other party. This makes sense because most creators don't allow for that. You can't just take someone else's art and profit off of it. Normal, right? So then I go, well, how am I going to force you to do this? Under this initiative, you would have to release the server binaries or keep the game in a functional, playable state at end of life. So I hit you with a ton of bots. I hit you with a ton of exploits. I attack your community, I destroy your Reddit, I go after your business. I go everywhere that I possibly can to make this cost as much as it possibly can for you. And it's not hard to do this. We saw the exact same thing happen in TF2 recently. The massive amount of bots that were attacking the game. This is not infeasible. This is something that is very easily attainable today. And let's say that this goes on long enough that your game dies because you can't afford it anymore. And your studio has to shut down. At end of life, you now have to release those server binaries to keep the game in a functional, playable state. At which point I take those, I create a private server, and I monetize it. And some people...
I think Thor's a little bit too smart for his own good. I think Thor is like... He's like 4D chessing this in a situation where this is not actually going to happen. It's like, well, what if we do this thing and 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 this thing, and then 5 years later, after the game's dead, and no one cares about the game anymore because the community has been completely destroyed by us destroying the game with bots and exploits. What if at that point, when everybody doesn't care about the game anymore because they know the game is shit, what if then we run our private servers and monetize it? It's just like, yes, sure, I guess that's a possibility that could happen. But, like, Like, okay. Think of this in another situation, right? Like, Counter-Strike. So, Counter-Strike is flooded with bots. Eventually, Valve is like, we don't care about Counter-Strike anymore. And they just, you can already run servers for it, right? So, you're just like, okay, well, I'm going to run my own servers and monetize them. It's just like, if you've made the game suck so much by doing all of this, why would anyone still care about it? Like, that's the part that I misunderstand. Like, I see what he's saying here, but if you do all of this, this is not going to happen.
Have said, well, simply don't allow monetization of the server. Well, who's going to enforce that? If you want a government initiative to enforce...
Wait, is this video basically just his comments?
That means the government has to build a registry of all of those games and all of that intellectual property that shouldn't be monetized, and then somehow enforce that.
Yeah, it's called DMCA.
With no one owning it, because those studios have shut down.
If no one owns it. If no one owns the game, then it doesn't matter, because no one owns the game anymore. If it's abandonware, I don't care what happens to it.
To be a massive burden. On top of that, if you want to go the other route and say the company has to go and control it, well, what if the company's not around anymore? Is that just able to be monetized now?
Yes.
Again, this was obtained through...
Yes, actually. That if the company is just non-existent anymore, completely abandoned, yes. Like there's people selling Blockbuster merch. If the company is completely gone, you should be able to monetize it. If no one owns the IP anymore. Obviously, if they're bought up by some holding firm, sure, whatever. But if the company is completely abandoned, the IP is gone, and the IP is just not even, like, registered anymore, sure. Yes. Yes, you should.
Abuse of the original creator. I don't think that's a good route. And this scenario gets even worse if you do allow monetization. Because now I can just kill off your company and then monetize the server and no one will ever come after me. Now it's even more of a problem.
If bots are so easy to operate in this game and exploits are so wide, why wouldn't they do this to you why wouldn't someone just spam you with bot? Here we go. Let's go 4D chess even more, right? So you take the company down with bots, exploits, with like tons of bots and exploits, okay? And then you run your private server, and for some reason you still have a player base. Now we have a third party down here, and they do the same thing to you. And then you just have the cycle of life.
So allowing monetization of this work is strictly worse. And for those of you out there that say, oh, this can be done right now, I could just destroy your studio and take your stuff anyway. You could, but this allows a route for it to be legal to do so. That's the problem.
No, it doesn't. Why would it suddenly be legal to, like, if you're spamming, you know, here's my hot take, right? If you're botting in a game, this should be considered cybercrime. There you go. Solve your problem.
After putting this out publicly and talking to people about it, this specific scenario on both YouTube and Discord and Reddit and a bunch of other locations, I got a couple of takes back. We're going to start with the most...
Yeah, like, there's plenty of those protecting servers from attacks. Yo, how's it going? Welcome.
Extreme position and kind of go from there. So, in the most extreme, people said live service games shouldn't exist at all, and the initiative will kill them off for good, and that's a good thing.
That's a stupid
You don't
take.
get to define what players get to play or not play. You also shouldn't be able to get to define what developers build or don't build. You should not have creative control over the developers, and you should not have control over what is in my Steam library or on my phone. That doesn't make any goddamn sense.
Yeah, we agree. Yes, you shouldn't have control over what is on my Steam library or my phone, and that's why the company should have to make the service available.
Aside from that, the initiative does not purport to kill live service games. It would just make it incredibly difficult to build said games and add a lot of risk to it,
wouldn't.
which is why I'm bringing all of this up and why I don't support the initiative in the first place. A lot of people don't realize that this will slowly diminish live service games in the market because it's not an incentive for us to build them anymore.
Good. If you cannot build your software in a way that is ethical, and you cannot operate your business in a way that is ethical, you shouldn't be in business. Like, yeah, people are gonna lose their job from this. Like, yeah, sure, that's bad. But if the only reason your company is in business is because it's exploiting consumers, Okay.
which means you get less multiplayer live experiences. That sucks. I like live service games. I enjoy playing things like Final Fantasy XIV. I enjoy going and playing in games in the past, at least, like League of Legends. These are games that are live service. They require a live service to run. And you shouldn't be able to take that away from people. And if that's your only position on this, not only are you disingenuous in what the initiative is purporting to try and achieve, but you're also aggressively attacking other players instead of trying to fix something. So the next one is that this is about games preservation.
That is exactly
it needs
what
to
it is,
happen
yes.
to preserve these types of games for future generations and for everyone to always have forever. But I would argue that this isn't actually preserving these games. Social games, such as, let's say, Apex Legends, require a number of players to be in the match at the same time so that you can have an experience that is only able to be obtained through lots of players interacting. Right? It's a multiplayer game. You need a bunch of people. How many of you have felt negatively when an MMO dies or when a live service game dies? Oh, dead game. There's only 5 people online. Why would I play that? So why would you want to preserve a game in that state? That doesn't make any sense to me. You want to take down these live service games, put them up on a private server, and then play it with a couple of people. You're not bringing it back at its height. You're not taking a snapshot of what the game actually is. You're making it limp on in a way that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, but your option is the game doesn't exist, or the game has a reduced player base.
It's not preservation. And for those that may...
No, that is preservation. Yes, it is. To argue that being able to continue running the game is not preservation, that is a really dumb take. Like, again, if nobody wants to play the game, and it's a multiplayer game, you're not going to be able to play it. But if there are people that want to play the game, and they want to run servers for it, and they want to do matches together, like, think of a game like Quake, right? Quake 3, when did Quake 3 come out? Let me find out when Quake 3 came out. Quake 3 came out in 1999. There are still people that actively play Quake 3. And the reason they actively play Quake 3 is because they can run servers for it. Yeah, there might not be as many servers as there were in 1999, and maybe those servers aren't as full as they used to be, but there are still people keeping that game alive. Or EverQuest. EverQuest has hardly anyone playing it anymore. But the people who want to keep playing it, they can keep playing it.
Stop there and go, but private servers going to have a lot of players. Look at all the ones for World of Warcraft. Again, we talked about that. It opens up a route for abuse of the developers, so that is not a solution. And the last thing...
You could already abuse the developers before. It doesn't open a route for abuse of the developers.
That I got from this is, and it's the most reasonable to me, this...
I don't know why he's not making this argument. The most logical argument you can make about it being abuse on the developers is that if you release the server binaries, it makes it easier to cheat in the future games because you're likely using the same server architecture in your future games if it's the same genre. Like, if you make Online Racing Game 1 and you make Online Racing Game 2, it's very likely your server architecture for Online Racing Game 2 is probably pretty similar to the first game. It might not be the exact same binaries, but it probably shares a lot of similarities with it. So by making those servers available, it becomes easier to cheat on the second game. I don't know why he hasn't made that argument, because that, I think, is his strongest argument.
This is an initiative. It's not a law. Why are you upset? Just wait. I'm not going to wait. And the reason I'm not going to wait is because I see the start of this conversation not making sense. It's not including the actual developer side of the conversation. It's not showing the trials and problems that this could arise inside of the gaming industry for people who are actually making the games you play. I don't have any reason.
See, that would be a reasonable thing to argue. Make carve out, except the anti-cheat logic doesn't need to be released. Well, yeah, the anti-cheat stuff, that also goes into some of the software that you don't actually own that you can't release.
To be quiet about that. And many other developers aren't going to be able to speak on this. As I explained before, it's really easy to lose your job if you're working at a major studio and try to speak out of turn on something like this, especially with something people are so passionate about. Doesn't make any sense to stay quiet. And it also doesn't make any sense to wait until it's in a different form when I see that it has so many problems with the language as it is currently written. I should be able
I read the comment you made before. I already saw the comment.
to be talking
You need to
about
say it
this.
again.
In fact, I should be talking about this. I am a content creator specifically that is a game developer that has worked in this industry for 20 years. This is my wheelhouse. This is what I do. So for those who are calling for me to just be silent and sit in the corner, no. With all of that being said, I do think there's a consumer protection thing that we can fix here.
Sure.
It's just not really what the initiative is about. I think that if you're going to buy a live service game, you shouldn't be told you're buying the game. You shouldn't be told that you're purchasing the game. You should be told explicitly that you are purchasing a license to that game. The reason why is because that license needs to be revoked anytime that you are cheating at the game and damaging the play experience of other players.
This part of his argument only makes sense if the other part of the argument doesn't happen, where you can't run servers.
While this is written in the TOS and the EULA, it's usually not clearly defined at point of sale. Or they throw a giant TOS in front of you and it doesn't really do anything because people skip past it. If at point of
Wasn't he arguing in the last video that if it's part of the TOS that it's something that you already know?
sale, it says specifically, there's specific language stating that you are either leasing or purchasing a license or anything along those lines, that you're not actually buying the game directly. I think it would go a long way to informing consumers of what they're doing and protect them from some of these business practices that they didn't realize they were.
I'm going to say it again. I'll say it again. I just don't think the whole idea of you leasing a game or you buying a license to it should be what happens. Like, I don't support that practice.
Engaging it. That makes a lot more sense to me than force all developers to leave the game in a functional, playable state. And that's about it. That's all I really wanted to talk about with this. I hope that's clarified some things for some of you and some of the dangers that this can cause as it is currently written. If you're still mad about this, not much I can do about it. Outside of that, I'm going to be gone for the next 4 days, so if you expect me to respond or anything like that and you think I'm ducking the issue or hiding in some way...
Pretty sure he's at DEF CON.
I'm just in Vegas because there's DEF CON going on, which is a hacking convention, and it's the first vacation I've had in 5 years. I can't wait to see my friends out there. So with that in mind, see y'all later.
I think he... I think he missed his strongest argument. The strongest argument is releasing the servers makes it easier to cheat on future games. Like, that's the argument he should have drove home. And I don't understand why that was not part of the argument you brought up. Instead, focusing on these things where it's not part of what's being discussed. It's just a straw man. Alright, I'm done. Narrator. He was in fact not done. Since you mentioned TF2, it's worth mentioning the game didn't even launch with official servers. People had to host or join community-made servers to play. Official servers weren't implemented until 2011, 4 years after the game's release, and people are still able to play it on custom servers to this day. Your take on preservation is very misunderstood. People don't want to preserve a game because they think there'll be a day it'll be popular again. People want to preserve games because they want the option to play, period. Absolutely true. We're seeing this through the fighting game community and Marvel vs. Capcom. There are people that still play, like, Smash Melee today. And they can do that because people want to play the game. They bought the game and they can play the game. There was a whole movement years ago to remaster the older games because there was no way to officially play them. Eventually, Capcom was able to get momentum, and now we have Marvel vs. Capcom Collection coming soon. Will it outpace Street Fighter 6? No, but that wasn't the point. Now there's an official way to play these games influential. I think you mean these influential. As Lewis Rossman said on this, if this throws a wrench in the works, then this seems to be a wrench that needs to be thrown. I don't know, man. Like, I don't know if he's intentionally misunderstanding things, or... Like, I want this to be a situation where he doesn't get what's going on. He didn't read it properly. And now he's just arguing very strongly on the point that he didn't read properly. Because he really did misunderstand the FAQ. Yeah. I don't want it to be an intentional misunderstanding. Because he seems like... Everything I've watched of Thor so far, he seems like a cool dude. He seems like someone who just wants the best for developers, wants the best for gamers, wants to just do cool things. But, like, I don't get what this position is. I don't get why he's arguing this perspective. Well, I do get it. I don't want my interpretation to be the reason he's arguing this. And people are arguing like, oh, intentionally bad actor, all this stuff, but like... Or like, you can take the man out of Blizzard, but you can't take the Blizzard out of the man. Things like that. Like, I don't want that to be the position, but... I don't know. This has definitely thrown a wrench into the argument, and... I guess we'll see, where this ends up going. Yeah. Anyway, I'm gonna end the stream here. I'm gonna go make some lunch. And, pretty much be done for the day. So... I'll be expecting this and the other reaction video in your backlog. I'll upload this one first. Just because this one's more timely. The other one doesn't really matter when it gets uploaded. I'll upload that one later. Yeah. Anyway, I'm gonna head out. Tomorrow we have a Cosmic stream. On the weekend, we have the second of the post-AvCon indie game discussions. This time it'll be with the developers of Blood Reaver. I'm thinking of doing a morning Cosmic stream. That's what I'm thinking right now. Does anyone know if Cosmic's in the Fedora repos or Copper yet? I think they were trying to get it into Rawhide, so it should be getting close to the Fedora repos. Fedora Cosmic. Right now, it looks like it might still be on Copper. But there's someone trying to get it through the Rawhide process, so... soon. Anyway. That's gonna be it for me. So, enjoy the rest of the day, all the fun stuff. Yeah, I'm gonna go. So, peace. Peace out. Bye-bye. I should come up with an actual outro at some point, shouldn't I? I really should. Bye. Just do a VTuber style outro? Yeah, absolutely.